Visiting Hyperspace, Light Journey, a DMT trip report posted to Erowid on July 19th, 2010. DMT is probably the most mysterious drug known to man. Very few people that I speak to know anything about it, and fewer still have tried it. And if you haven't tried it, you can't possibly be expected to understand it. Thus, it is also an extremely misunderstood substance. I would rather refer to it as a substance than a drug, because in my mind it is, quite frankly, a magical substance. The word drug can be used to define pretty much any chemical compound, but I have trouble grouping any psychedelic drugs in with those like heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, or even prescription drugs like painkillers or antidepressants. The so-called psychedelic compounds such as psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, peyote, mescaline, and DMT are non-addictive drugs, and each in its own way tends to steer the user towards a deeper and more useful understanding of life. Of course, individuals who do not understand their true value and consume them as recreational drugs can abuse them, but education could do a lot to change that. Unfortunately, the powers that be and the media have painted all drugs with the same brush ever since the emergence of psychedelic drugs in Western culture in the 60s. What the general public and a great many supposedly educated individuals are unaware of is that psychedelics are profoundly important compounds, worthy of intense research and study, and none more than the spirit molecule, DMT. Terence McKenna has said, quote, "For the last 500 years, Western culture has suppressed the idea of disembodied intelligences, of the presence and reality of spirit. 30 seconds into the DMT flash, and that's a dead issue." End quote. There are countless places where one can read about DMT online and in bookstores. I will leave it to you, the reader, to pursue these readings if the spirit moves you. I don't want to provide countless links to DMT information here, I only wish to relate my own personal experience with it. In my mind, DMT is not so much a drug as it is a spiritual conduit, a portal to the 4th, 5th, 6th, and so on dimensions. There are lots of theories about the DMT experience. I don't wish to theorize too much, although I do get to that eventually. I can't help myself. And experiencing these phenomenon firsthand, I'm not so sure it is theorizing. My experience, I hope, speaks for itself, and my ideas as to what is actually happening, well, they are my ideas, that's all. Once upon a time, almost 20 years ago, I sat cross-legged on the floor of our small extra room in a Hollywood Hills bungalow where I lived in the early 90s. With me was a close friend and fellow spirit traveller who I will call Airy. Airy had with him a small amount of powdered DMT. For months prior to this moment, I'd been listening to lectures about DMT and reading everything I could get my hands on about this incredible drug. I'd been to see Terence McKenna speak in Ventura, California, and he touched on his experiences with DMT. A long-time psychedelic traveller, having taken hundreds of carefully staged psychedelic drug trips myself, I felt as ready as I could possibly be to try DMT and attempt to punch through the thin membrane of what we call reality into DMT hyperspace. Airy held up a small clear glass pipe loaded up with approximately 50 milligrams of pure DMT. As he held the butane lighter underneath the pipe, you could see the powder melt quickly into a pool of yellowish fluid. Shortly, the fluid began to vaporize, and thick white smoke began forming in the round receptacle of the pipe. I began to inhale. I have heard that many people have a tendency to cough when they first feel the DMT smoke hitting their lungs. I had no such tendency, having seemingly cast iron lungs, and although the smoke did taste strange and slightly harsh, I had absolutely no trouble keeping the smoke down. As far as I can remember, I completely emptied the pipe of its contents. All 50 milligrams of DMT was vaporized and inhaled into my lungs, and I held it in as long as I could, and then gently exhaled the strange, slightly plastic-tasting smoke. Almost immediately, after only seconds, an intense buzzing vibrational sound began to well up, as if coming from inside me, and yet enveloping me from the outside as well. The intense vibration could be heard and felt, and then tasted as well, and then seen, as everything in my field of vision began to vibrate intensely, as if pulsating waves of electric energy were emerging from within the very matter all around me. I looked directly into the eyes of Aerie, who was shirtless, sitting in the lotus position in front of me, smiling mischievously. As our gazes met, the most intricate and beautiful fractal patterns began to spread across his face and body, like morphing, animated tattoos on his skin. The familiarity of these designs on his skin was amazing to me, as if I'd always known they were there. It is hard to explain how something so foreign to our everyday waking life could seem so utterly familiar, but that is the best way I can explain it. Watching Aerie's flesh crawl with these gorgeous, constantly changing and growing patterns was, if anything, extremely calming and reassuring to me, and I felt warm layers of loving energy enveloping me as I watched this energy spread to everything in the room. At this point, the effects accelerated very quickly. What was simply a tapestry of unfolding, geometric light patterns emerging from everything around me became the only thing I could perceive, as it completely overwhelmed my surroundings. And as the form and geometry of the familiar room left me, the new geometry began to unfold, layer after layer of laughing, giggling, incredibly lively beings that unfolded themselves from the geometry, greeting me with enthusiastic cheers. I use words like cheers very loosely. Nothing sounded like anything I've ever heard before, just as nothing looked like anything I had ever seen before. These beings appearing all around me buzzed and crackled with noise and energy that was like musical vibratory language, which, while being completely new to me, was once again completely 100% familiar and reassuring. I seemed to understand them, as it were. The way in which these entities unfolded themselves from the multidimensional fabric from which they emerged was astounding. It was as if they pulled themselves out of three-dimensional envelopes that were laid flat within the walls of the now living chamber of electric colour and light that surrounded me. As they unfolded, their appendages, arms and legs, heads and faces all seemed to roll in and around upon themselves, self-transforming constantly in what can only be described as 4 or 5 or even 6 dimensions of liquid light matter. Their demeanour was profoundly jovial and welcoming, and they seemed to clamber over each other towards me, each wanting desperately to share his, her, or its magical abilities with me. The language with which they communicate with me is made of pure light wave vibrations, thought, sight, smell, touch, taste, all involved in the transmission of information. And so as this trip progressed, the countless wonderful, hilarious, animated, self-transforming, liquid light energy creatures vied for my attention. They pulled things into existence as if from pockets of vacuum space within themselves, like beautifully jeweled, liquid light revolving eggs that transformed into and out of themselves, like rolling smoke infused with layer after layer of brightly coloured electrical information. Hieroglyphics, fractal in nature, unfolded endlessly from everything, pouring into my view with beautiful sounds and vibratory waves. Some of the entities held out what looked like tickets or small flash drives very close in front of my eyes for me to look at. "Check this out," they giggle. "Look carefully, see what this is, remember it. This is how it all works," they seem to say. The objects, looking like flash drive tickets, seem to be information storage devices full of infinite potential. But then, everything in this unfolding, phantasmagorical, liquid web world around seemed to be infused with pure energy and potential. In this place, the very atoms and particles that make up the world around us reveal themselves to us for what they really are. Not solid objects at all, but buzzing, whirring, living things made up of waves of pure information, intelligence and language. Imagine it is there for us to see, and it loves us, and it wants to share its information with us. It wants us to join it. As atoms, molecules, waves and particles act as attractors to each other and build the blocks of life all around us, we are one with this energy. It is what we are made of. There is no separation. We are not in any way separate from the matter all around us. The only thing that separates us is the idea of matter. My beautiful, playful, mischievous, elven brethren implore me to look and to see and to remember. At this point in my short journey, it has probably been about 5 or 10 minutes since I inhaled the DMT smoke into my lungs, and as strangely and beautifully as entities all around me appeared, they begin now to recede back whence they came. But the way in which they do this is one of the most fantastic and memorable aspects of the experience. They actually all start waving and saying, "Goodbye," and "Time to go, nice seeing you, love you," and such sort of thing, as they comically start folding back in upon themselves. Once again they implore me to "Check this out, isn't this cool?" as they pull off this wonderful magical trick of folding themselves in layer after layer of glowing, vibrating waves of electrical light back into the surrounding spatial structure, which itself begins to glow, hum and whir less and less as it returns to the room around me that I started out in. Slowly but quickly, the sweet, generous little beings fold themselves back into the wall, pulling appendages up and into themselves, folding up in cute little fetal positions as they lay down back into their little envelopes of informational energy. They recede. The walls around me, made of pure liquid light energy, gently return to their previous state. Solid walls of plaster, paint and tacky wooden siding. My friend Airy is there where he was, sitting bemused in his lotus position, eyes inquiring. How was it, my friend? This all happened to me almost 20 years ago, and this is the first time I've been able to put it into words to a degree that satisfies me even remotely. And for the record, I have to say, these memories are as if it all happened just this morning. I am not embellishing or adding to the experience to my knowledge in any way. If anything, it is a simplified and dumbed down version of an experience that one can only think of as life transforming. As I write these words, the experience is fresh and clear, clearer than ever. I didn't even find the time to mention how, during the voyage, when I heard my wife, who was in the next room speaking Czech on the telephone, I could see her words and understood every word she said. And I could hear the other person on the line in Czechoslovakia as if she was in the same room as well. Or that the next room was not the next room, but an adjacent space separated only by particles of pure light wave energy. I remember clearly as I saw my wife's words enter my field of vision that I uttered the words, "I see what you mean." We can all listen to the theories about quantum physics and sort of understand that every atom is a whirring group of electrically charged particles and waves in perpetual motion, filled with information. It all kind of makes sense in a very strange way. We try to wrap our minds around the idea that the solid objects all around us are not at all solid, but mostly space, and that space is filled with information. And here is a substance that shows us this energy, all those whirring, buzzing particles and waves of energy that quantum physicists describe to us. Suddenly, with nothing more than a minor chemical tweaking of our neurotransmitters and receivers, the entire universe of quantum physics comes sharply into our view. And what a surprise it is to find that these particles are highly conscious and self-aware, and that they are enthusiastic and happy to see us. They want to show us how it all works. Immediately they rush to show us how, with nothing more than intention, these particles can transform and mutate into any form that they wish. The energy that they are alive with contains within it the very language of creation, the code, the electronically charged, quantum, chaotic mathematics that enables all life to exist in the universe. And when we are in that space where we can see it, and it can see us, information is exchanged at a furious rate as every particle reveals itself to us and does its best to show us what is going on there. Atoms and particles, after all, as many physicists will tell us, are incredible little bundles of information that perpetually interact with other atoms and particles, exchanging information, building life, forever transforming into whatever the surrounding environment's intention puts forth. What a blessing, what a privilege to be able to see this firsthand and communicate and exchange information with these entities. In another experience of mine, more recently, I was looking at my cat, Frank, as the magic unfolded, and the physics of molecular, atomic, revealed themselves to me yet again. The cat's whiskers became incredibly complex, buzzing antennae, in which I could see beautifully unfolding mathematical code, the language of information, both entering the cat's whiskers and emanating from it, in pulsating waves of spectacular activity. To describe the depth and beauty of this code and activity is impossible with the language skills I possess. It seems to work in more than 3 dimensions. The dimensionality of it is 4, 5, or 6-fold, like computer graphics of unimaginably detailed and colourful liquid linguistic hieroglyphics stacked together in an interweaving structure, all of it glowing, buzzing, and constantly transforming and outputting tremendous amounts of energy and information. Another prominent feature of this incredible experience is the interweaving of the senses, the incredible crossover of the sensory inputs that we usually perceive as independent of each other. Suddenly we can see sounds and hear colours. We can see smells and touch ideas. Thoughts immediately become things as our intention bonds with the surrounding environment of pure energy. Sight, smell, hearing, touch, intuition, logic, all our senses and thought processes become one incredible information processing device, capable of interacting with the conscious universe of quantum physics all around us. It is important to note here that the feelings I had during these incredible exchanges were of absolute joy. I'd never felt more welcome in any environment I've encountered in this life. This is not to say that there was not a slightly scary aspect to it all. After all, this is stranger than being at the bottom of the ocean, and one has no idea at all what to expect next. But somehow, the surrounding energy infused me with a sense of being safe and deeply loved. There is what I will call dark matter at play here as well, but I could see, from my perspective, that this dark matter is simply part of the building blocks of the quantum reality. The pure liquid light energy that seemed to flow all around me fuses with the dark matter that occupies the spaces in between its energy particles, and then intention becomes reality as it unfolds. As long as the intention is good, the reality is good. I would not want to experience such energy with anything but good intentions. I have a sneaking suspicion that this dark matter, if coupled up with fear or bad intentions, would give rise to all sorts of hellish manifestations. But that does not matter to me. Fear and bad intentions play no part in this story, as well they should not.